All right.
Are those supposed to make up for canceling on me last night?
I got stuck with an extra shift on the bridge.
All right.
What can I say?
So I crashed this drone earlier. Surprisingly, I mean, it's fairly intact still. Oh, I'm wrong. That is broken. This crack right here. These are only about $20 online. I might just order a new one, or we could also 3D print a frame. I downloaded, excuse me, I'm gonna get in front of the camera. I downloaded a quadcopter on there earlier, but I have been having a hard time getting it to print at all. Let's see. Let's try that. I'm gonna lessen the offset here. That. We'll see how that goes. Watching some Star Trek. All right. Looks like I broke this a bit. Jesus, that was a rough one, man. So I guess all we can do is strip this guy down.
Use is hard as a rock. You haven't been following the relaxation regimen I prescribed for you.
I've been too busy.
The usual story. You've been getting enough sleep.
More or less, mostly less.
Mm-hmm. Have your headaches been getting any worse?
No. They're not getting any better either. They're like hot needles driving into my skull.
These symptoms are hardly surprising, Captain. Certainly long hours of constant stress. Eating on the run without sufficient exercise or rest. Your body is crying out for mercy.
It certainly is right now. There's an easier way to do this, Doctor. A hypo spray, maybe?
Always looking for the simple fix. There's no substitute for intensive osteopathic pressure therapy.
All right. So, yeah, it's looking like this frame is done. So I'm going to strip down these pieces here.
On my way.
Captain.
I know what you're going to say, Doctor, but I can't neglect.
I recently found out that I got these flight controllers off of Amazon. They're like $150. I bought a couple of them, and I just now seen on Amazon a nicer looking one. It looks a little bit newer, same company, for like half the price.
I think we can collect some invaluable data.
Captain, my board.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm a little too tired to concentrate on stuff. I'll leave this project in your capable hands.
I'm going to leave all the wiring intact. Hopefully, this next airframe that I'm giving a try here, drone frame, I'm hoping it'll still fit. Check out that prop bent. I've never had one bend and not break.
Good. All of the specs are at my upper workstation.
Okay. Oops.
Commander, Lieutenant, here is the power usage data you requested.
Right. Of course. I didn't expect it quite so promptly, which I guess I should have coming from you. I mean, I'm grateful that you got data to me so quickly. Thanks.
And it's darn 3D printer too. It does this little, it like extrudes a little bit before it starts every time.
Right. Well, I guess there's no harm done. It's not like there was a security violation or anything. None that I'm aware of. So I guess there's nothing that would have to go on any kind of report. You want me to concede?
I think I need to clean or like look up if there's like a new, like a cover plate I can buy for that thing. I think that's a bit dirty.
Certainly not.
All right, so just disconnecting all the ESCs from the motors. Little trim here, little cut there.
Sounded Vulcan. What can I tell you? Deck one.
You've got to be more careful with computers. You should go to the big
Good idea. Okay, you go in first. I'll come in a minute.
No, I'm looking at more suspicious.
Listen to us.
All right, it's the guts.
I just thought we wanted to do ourselves.
Flight controller, power distribution board, and the ESCs all in one. And keep that just like that.
Let's figure it out. Listen.
Well,
All right.
I don't think that it's anybody else's business how we feel about each other.
You know what? I'm gonna go check my parts really quick. I might have a replacement for this guy. I'll be back.
At least for now.
Wow. Looks like you see a future in this.
I would never be so presumptuous.
Smooth recovery, Lieutenant.
I thought so. Computer, resume.
So all the others
Right. Here's the plan. We'll circle the two pulsars at a minimum distance of 80 million kilometers.
That might not be far enough. We've been detecting some random proton bursts. Strong could not get it.
Tom, go to 90. Keep it a safe distance. Yes, sir. Tuvok, keep our shields at maximum strength. Divert auxiliary power if you need it. I want to take every precaution on this survey. Report any problems immediately, no matter how small.
Dismissed. Lieutenant Paris from Taurus. Let me speak with you.
Thanks.
I don't usually buy the personal lives of my crew.
All right, I didn't quite see one.
Yes, Tuvok.
Do I? I don't have to do that. But you do a good
Oh, maybe it's in here. Why did I say that like a pirate?
You are senior officer.
Found a replacement leg for this guy.
Standard for the rest of the crew, but this doesn't mean question my faith. Pursue relationships. Under orders to use better judgment.
I say that's a replacement. Oh, I love spare parts.
Computer, hot copy, black.
All right, I need to organize this stuff a little. Do need this guy. Well, I got 0 people watching, but that's okay.
There's a rare genetic disorder called progeria, which causes children to age prematurely. But there's never been an adult case. And it was supposedly eradicated a few centuries ago. Even so, I took a close look at your DNA.
All right.
Segments regulate your body's metabolism. My scans indicate
We're gonna swap. No, we're gonna just build into this one. Start here.
Is there a sign of an infectious agent?
We spent several hours near a library complex emitting intense gamma radiation.
Our shields were operating. Let's see how I could have been exposed to it.
This company will eliminate it.
I would like to take a closer look at the data documented.
Responsible for scans in my quarters, as well as my office and the bridge. Everywhere I've been today.
I'm not prepared to send you back on duty yet, Commander.
The prince I'd rather stay busy than just sit here.
I have no idea how your symptoms will progress. You should remain in
Oh,
sick
that's
for
the wrong
observation.
one.
He's right, Captain. I'll keep him informed.
Whatever's affecting the commander's DNA is working at a submolecular level. I'd like to set up an
Oh, Jesus. Look at the printer going to town.
Still having headaches, Captain?
Oh, boy. I don't think this is correct.
Work on the scanner right away. Underwater, you better than
In the bucket. Trick or treat.
I forgot I was talking to the
Yeah, guys.
Good morning. Alex, I was just about to whip up a fresh batch of scrambled eggs. Would you like some?
Actually, I was hoping you might have some leftover Bleaker-Rye casserole from last night. For breakfast? Okay. Sure, I can find some.
Okay. Let's try it again, huh?
Secret anymore. Think anybody on this ship can keep a secret? Felix! What's happening? Paris to the doctor. I'm bringing Neelix to sick bay. It's an emergency.
What is it? It seems that your DNA has been hyperstimulated, just like Commander Chakotay's. This doesn't seem to be aging. The effects are different.
Anything that look at my lead. They occupy a region of space near time.
Oh, I see this one does have a broken leg.
Share a common
Change
ancestor.
that out.
What do they know?
The two races came together.
Yes. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather was my land.
And 1/8 of your genetic material was inherited from him. Those must be the genes which have become simulated. As far as I can tell, his condition seems stable. I'm going to leave you in charge of sick bay so I can continue the DNA analysis.
If anyone else comes in, I'll run the cellular scan. Is there anything else I can do?
Do your best to keep him comfortable until we have more information. So that's how it is.
I seem to be developing my lean sweat gland, sorry. I try to keep in mind that things could be worse. I still have a home here. My friends, your hair. Gladly. Just bounce back. At least you're not losing your eyesight. See that display over there? It's nothing but you think that's bad? The doctor tells me my pupils are dying when you're 60%. I can't look at that spine so bright. Yeah. Well, I've got chronic arthritis in my fingers. I can barely keep this glass steady. But that's nothing. My spinal column is weakening together. In a matter of days, I won't be able to walk. Dr. Wheat. I can barely walk now. Can we help? I don't think so. I'm releasing you back to your quarters. I'm just going to report some more patients on the way. It's going to get crowded in here.
How's the scanner?
Almost ready.
Good. This disorder seems to be spreading rapidly.
Does that mean we'll all be affected?
Yeah, but it only means that we need to find some answers as quickly as possible.
All right, give the scanner a try.
So, Commander Chakotay.
How's the resolution?
Nice. We stimulated segments of his DNA and can give you more magnification.
What is?
Seems to be some kind of contaminant. Base pair cigarettes. Didn't show up on the first scan.
Like that print selling.
A closer look.
I'm going to maximum magnification.
We're We're just gonna learn through trial and error with the printer, guys.
You see,
I'm not precisely sure.
what does it look like?
See for yourself.
I really think that deck is just too dirty up there. I had some chicken earlier. I might have got it a little on the greasy side.
I've never seen anything like it. This level of cybermolecular technology is well beyond anything Starfleet has developed.
There's markings. Some kind of alien writing.
I wish I knew. They might help us determine where it came from.
You couldn't put this into Chakotay's cells without his knowledge. Composition analysis.
It's in Mr. Neelix's DNA as well.
Is this what's causing the mutations?
A good scientist never jumps to conclusions, Lieutenant. I'd say it's a distinct possibility.
I'm having trouble getting a clear reading from the sample. It looks almost like the, whatever it is, could be slightly out of phase.
Took this drone out earlier today. Trying to do a little test flight of its autonomy, you know.
I'm picking up an energy signature. This thing is transmitting.
And as soon as I flipped it into position hold mode,
It's too weak to travel very far.
started to get a little funky. I think the flight controller came loose. It's a possibility.
Right. Lieutenant.
Your program is being deleted. How? I don't know. I'm transferring you back to sickbay.
Science light to the bridge. This is the doctor.
In the last hour, 3 more patients have come in with genetic mutations. The effects are starting to become life-threatening.
What happened to Alana?
The alveoli in her lungs suddenly stopped processing oxygen. I've got her on respiratory support.
God, what is it doing now?
The computer logs in the science lab show that he was trying to transfer himself to sick bay. Something must have gone wrong while he was transferred.
7 of 9. This is the doctor. Can you hear me? It's me, the doctor. I tapped into your audio implants, so only you can hear me. It's imperative that you tell no one. Make any excuse to get out of there and report to Holodeck 2. I'm hiding in the Da Vinci simulation. I'll explain everything when you get here.
7.
Change the vertical offset on that a little bit. Let's see.
Yes. I examined your work area. There was no record of any findings. The electron resonance scanner appeared to be malfunctioning. I could return to the science lab and attempt to repair it. Keep me informed.
This I can only conclude that this alien has implanted these microscopic tags in the DNA of the group to cause genetic mutations. I don't know. And I have the feeling I don't want us to find out.
Explain.
Lieutenant Pearson started making progress in our investigation. We're incapacitated. But I don't think that's a coincidence. That's why I call this not a critical system. First course of action should be to collect more information. My thinking exactly. Alana wanted to adjust the ship's internal sensors to obtain these variants of 0.15. I'd like to do the same to your board sensory analysis.
Proceed.
Computer, give me a type 4 microinducer. Now, take a look around and tell me what you see. Do you see anything unusual? Energy signatures? Perhaps something that transmitting the signal.
No.
All right, I think I gotta change that nozzle maybe. Jesus.
Bigger and more powerful than the Titanic, faster than any other ship in her class, taller than the Eiffel Tower. Beautiful ship she is. The Queen Mary is the last survivor of the golden age of ocean liners. Built with the blood and sweat of the master craftsmen in Scotland shipyards, she helped drag a nation from the depths of the Great Depression and set sail as a symbol of new hope and a better future.
The great day has arrived for the maiden voyage of the Queen Mary.
Movie stars, politicians, and royalty crossed the Atlantic luxuriously cocooned in a floating palace.
During the performance, I was sliding back and forth. Chances are, cause I wear a silly grin, and I didn't have to move for it.
Designed in peacetime to link the old world with the new, she was transformed to challenge the fury of the Nazis and brought whole armies to Europe.
When we got there, we looked up at this huge monstrosity, you know, and said, oh my God. We knew that ships were being sunk, but now we were going into harm's way.
She was the British Navy's most iconic ship, so Hitler offered a $250,000 reward for any U-boat captain that could sink her. But her size and speed made her unsinkable, and she became Churchill's war rooms at sea.
This is the Chechen equivalent to Air Force One. Outside.
Through tragedy,
Incredible the amount of damage it did
to triumph.
Oh, everybody was so damn happy to be going home.
80 years after her maiden voyage, she continues to win the hearts of millions of visitors who want to learn the amazing story of this queen of the seas. It's early morning in the historic British port of Southampton. 80 years ago, this famous harbor was the scene of one of the most
All right, so that part's not together.
News cameras.
So we still have the problem because these little threaded anchors that go in the bottom here are still stuck. So continuing on.
5,000 miles away in the heart of sun-drenched California, that ship is permanently moored in the port city of Long Beach. She's a floating hotel and museum, an attraction that brings in over 1.5 million visitors each year. Honorary Captain Everett Ward has been with the Queen Mary for most of her life in Long Beach.
We're now walking into the Grand Salon, which is the largest room in the Queen Mary. Originally the first-class dining room in the Queen Mary from the North Atlantic, it is now our finest room. We are celebrating our Champagne Sunday brunch, which we do every Sunday here in the Queen Mary. As you'll see, there are over 100 gustatory delights laid out for people to enjoy. And where can you eat in a room so splendid as this? The room is paneled in peroba wood from Brazil. There's a beautiful map of the North Atlantic Ocean up there. It's done by a fellow named MacDonald Gill all the way back in the 1930s. If you step into the middle of the room here, the most famous people in the world ate in this room. Indeed, the people that shaped the world that we live in today. Sir Winston Churchill, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Hollywood people, Clark Gable, Marlene Dietrich, Elizabeth Taylor, Cary Grant. They were all here. And so, even today, if you just stop and allow yourself to wonder, you can almost hear them speak. There's so many ways to enjoy the Queen Mary today. Being the very last ship of its kind on the earth, she's truly a pearl of great price. And I would say that she's actually a pearl of Scotland, because Scotland gave her life.
So how did this ship become such an icon of British glamour and end up in California? In 1926, the famous British shipping line Cunard made the decision to design a ship that was longer, bigger, and faster than any vessel ever built before. She would be the height of luxury, a veritable city afloat. When it was finally time for the build, there was really only one place in the world with the skills and craftsmen to construct such a monumental feat of engineering. Scotland's illustrious River Clyde is the #1 shipbuilding river in the world, with upwards of 40 shipyards around Clydebank and Glasgow. Ian Johnston has been researching and writing about the industrial history of Scotland for over 40 years.
The Queen Mary represented such a significant contract. Everybody knew about this ship because this was an enormous ship. This was going to be Britain's flagship on the high seas.
In 1930, at the height of the Great Depression, massive pieces of metal began to arrive at the famous John Brown shipyard. The promise of work for thousands of men was a welcome relief to the misery of the times, and by the end of the year, the keel was laid on Clydebank. The as yet nameless ship was known simply as Job Number 534. But the joy and lifeline she provided was short-lived. The depression was biting harder than ever. Cunard had run out of cash.
It was a calamity because the yard at that time was employing about between 2,000 and 3,000 people, mostly on this ship. So it meant that they had to let them go and abruptly.
History continues to be in the minute nightmare, where the December of 1921 began the blackest period of misery and corroding idleness.
And while the British yards lay idle, news came that the French were working on another great ship, the Normandy, with financial help from their government. Britain was at risk of losing its reputation as the world's leader.
So I'm gonna clean up some of this glue. I had prepared it before with
It was 2
glue.
long years before the British government put down the money to get things moving again.
Legs are good. I'm gonna replace this one. I believe it's the broken one, although it doesn't seem like it still works.
This was seen as a symbol of a resurgence of Great Britain and its manufacturing capacity. Things were going to get better.
After another 6 months of long, hard labor, the ship would be ready to launch. Nothing this size had ever been launched into the River Clyde before. The giant engines were not yet on board, so the designers were relying on mathematics to gauge how far the ship would travel into the narrow river. With both the King and Queen in attendance for the naming ceremony, alongside 250,000 spectators, these were precious moments for everyone involved.
I am British. Name this ship the Queen Mary. I wish success to her and all to sail in her.
Now formally named as the Queen Mary, the half-built ship was about to face her perilous first test. Would this mass of 35,000 tons of metal hold together as she was launched into the narrow river?
When you release a ship which has got no power on board and you just let it go into the river, you've got to know where it's going to stop. Because if you don't, you're potentially looking at a disaster.
Engineers feared that the ship might not stop and could crash into the other side of the river and the thousands of people watching.
In actual fact, they were just 2 feet out. The ship stopped almost exactly where they had predicted she would. So huge.
The launch was a triumph, but the Queen Mary still had 2 more years of finishing work ahead of her.
It's kind of cleaned enough.
Supership Normandy was
We'll get it onto there. I want to see what I'm going to do about getting these anchors back in there. I've seen pictures online. People heating these up and sticking them in. I'm going to try that.
So when the Queen Mary was finally ready to leave Clyde for her new home in Southampton, the company was keen to advertise their wondrous achievement.
One of the most loved documents is Cunard's Book of Comparison.
The Book of Comparisons was designed to show off the Superliner's impressive credentials. Placed upright, she was taller than the Eiffel Tower. 10 million rivets weighing 4,000 tons have been used in her construction. Each of the 4 epic propellers measured 20 feet high. They were so delicately balanced they could be turned with a touch of the hand. Her main engine could generate over 200,000 horsepower, even without a 1,500 steam engine.
They were just full of statistical superlatives. The amount of inventory that went into their manufacture was colossal.
Branches of some of the world's most famous stores could be found in the Queen Mary Shopping Center. With 3 acres of recreational deck space, 2 cinemas, 2 swimming pools, and 2 gymnasiums,
And the fact that there was a rivalry between the major liner companies, the fact that the French had built the superlative Normandy and that vessel had kind of thrown down the gauntlet to the British, and here a year later was another liner, slightly bigger, but would it be faster?
London terminus passengers took place for Southampton to embark upon the most memorable voyage in the history of Britain's merchant navy.
were on Southampton, and no expense had been spared in making this a momentous send-off. Getting a passage on the maiden voyage of the Queen Mary was like winning a magical golden ticket. Among those lucky few was 14-year-old Heather Beagley.
People had to put their names down well in advance if they wanted to go on the maiden voyage. It was rather like going to the moon now. Out of
Seems to be working.
Bubbled with excitement. Such spacious luxury and richness was rare on land, remarkable at sea.
It would have seemed like another world, a kind of fantasy world that had emerged in reality, and it was British.
Evenings were very much a gala affair, with champagne flowing and ball gowns glowing.
what we all loved was Henry Hall's dance band. The last night, we danced till 2:15, which, I'm surprised because it wasn't so laissez-faire then.
That concludes the program of dance music played to you by the BBC Dance Orchestra, directed by Henry Hall. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, and here's to the next one.
Mary neared America, news cameras flew out to greet her and see if she was going to win the blue ribbon for being the fastest ship across the Atlantic. The whole of New York was there to witness the arrival.
All right.
I cannot tell you how amazing the arrival in New York was. I don't know any other event that's equal that. Aeroplanes flew round above. Fire hoses played, arcing out on the river. And a lot of well-known people came out to welcome us. It was absolutely incredible.
Despite the joyous welcome, the maiden voyage of the Queen Mary took 4 days, 5 hours, and 24 minutes.
She didn't break the Normandy record, but the officers say they didn't think it wise to open up her engines full. Anytime they want, so the Englishmen say, they can take that record away.
A few months later, she did win the blue ribbon, and with the addition of a new type of propeller, she finally settled her rivalry with the Normandy, steaming to New York in well under 4 days. But soon, events in Europe would have a drastic effect on Britain's new superliner.
And in Vienna, the arrival of Hitler.
In 1938, Adolf Hitler swept unopposed into Austria. The fear that spread through Europe would see the luxury liner become a salvation for Jewish families, such as the Tenenbaums.
Well, this is me in Vienna.
These home movies show the happy life that Robert Tenenbaum and his family enjoyed before the arrival of Hitler.
That's my two grandfathers. My hands. Speyer, which, by the way, was the first in the school. Nazis. Another fun life.
But Robert's father knew there was trouble ahead, and it was time to leave Vienna.
Yeah, for a first class ticket on Queen Mary because she knew that if he didn't spend all his German money, it would be stolen from him as we passed the border. We were allowed to take the equivalent of $400 on a trip to the United States. That's all they allowed. The rest of it they would steal. So one of my cabin, a private bathroom, and a Queen Mary. Give it to the Brits. Give the money to the Brits, not to the damn Nazis. This is on the ship. There's Mom. Those glasses. Their sadness. Which I can understand. If we had stayed, there's a very good chance that we would have ended up in the nearest concentration camp.
The early crossings of 1939 were crammed full of people like the Tenenbaums, fleeing the Nazis in Europe. Then, on September 3rd, Britain declared war on Germany. From that moment, the Queen Mary was no longer just a passenger ship. She was a potential target of enemy submarines. The ship that had come to epitomize the style and elegance of the 30s was soon stripped down and transformed to take on a new role. The newly armed and camouflaged ship's speed and ability to cross U-boat-infested oceans unseen earned her the nickname the Grey Ghost, and she began a vital service, transporting British and Australian troops all over the world to the front lines in North Africa and the Middle East. But the Queen Mary would soon be speeding across the Atlantic again. When in December 1941 the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and America joined the war. Bill Spurrier was 16 at the time.
I graduated from high school, and the next next day I got a notice that I had been inducted into the service. They just said, go here and do that, and that's what I did. Yes, sir, and no, sir.
All right. This feels very sturdy. I think we're going to be able to fly again today. All right. So we got receiver, got some wires torn on that guy. But let's get the guts put back in this guy.
This huge monstrosity. Oh my God. And they loaded us in like the side of the ship. Of course, it had been converted into a transport, so a lot of the beautiful woodwork and everything were either covered up or moved, but we could tell it was a beautiful ship.
This was the beginning of one of the greatest movement of troops in history.
You know,
Mary had been refitted to carry
drops out the sky like that again. I don't know if I know what the issue
The
is.
Atlantic Ocean was a hazardous place. Record sinkings by U-boat wolf packs meant thousands of merchant ships met their end.
You know, let me look up
Amongst the victims,
something.
some of the world's most renowned liners. In those deadly days, vigilance was the price of life.
Captain explained that we're going to be zigzagging across, changing course about every 15 minutes. It really awakened us to the fact that now we were going into harm's way.
Realizing her troop-carrying potential, Hitler had offered a huge bounty and the Iron Cross, Germany's highest honor, to any U-boat captain that could sink the Queen Mary. But she was faster than all of them and would zigzag across the Atlantic to throw her pursuers off course. It was a huge relief to the thousands of troops she carried. With up to 15,000 men on board, space was at a premium, as evidenced by the sleeping and catering arrangements.
You had about that much room, really. It's like a sardine in a can, almost. And then, of course, they fed us twice a day because there was so many troops on there. Those poor chefs, all they did was, by the time they finished breakfast, it was dinner time to start, So it was just like a continuous convoy.
There was also the problem of how to occupy yourself on the 5-day crossing.
Gambling was forbidden aboard the ship. Well, that didn't work out too well. You can't control 12,000 guys and their desire to entertain themselves. And so there was card games and there was dice and there was poker going on all over the ship.
20-year-old Brooklyn boy Larry Schlesinger was a member of the military police in charge of security on the ship.
I was a complete neophyte. I've never been on anything bigger than a ferry before, and being on a huge ship like this was an out-of-world experience almost.
And it wasn't just poker-playing men on board that Larry had to contend.
Oh, darn.
In Mountain Power, America's women's soldiers trained the purpose of the war was created. Some bold deeds.
Whoops. I forgot to put the legs on.
Behind the lines.
There was a group of women's only corps, we call them WACs, on board. We kept the guard on the passageway to keep any Romeos out of the women's quarters, and also keep the women in their own area. One of the problems we had was keeping the soldiers below decks at night and not up on the deck where there would light cigarettes, which would be a dead giveaway to anybody who was looking for it.
Month after month, the Queen Mary safely negotiated the enemy-infested waters, and never once did she come under fire. But in 1942, her wartime service was touched by tragedy. It was a disaster so extreme, it was covered up until well after the end of the war. Traveling at over 30 miles an hour and powered by engines that take 20 miles to stop, the Queen Mary had crossed the Atlantic and was being escorted towards Scotland. The closest of the escorting ships was the aging cruiser Curaçao, struggling to keep pace. On board the Curaçao were 439 men. Full with over 14,000 troops, the Queen Mary was, as usual, following a zigzag course to confuse the enemy. In command was Officer of the Watch Noel James Robinson.
I walked out the wing of the bridge here, and I immediately saw the cruiser was rather too close, much too close, in fact dangerously close.
Immediately, Robinson gave the order to put the helm hard port. But it was too late. The Queen Mary slammed into the other ship with ferocious force, cutting it completely in half. That was the crushing force of 81,000 tons charging through the ocean at an unstoppable rate.
The actual impact was not even noticed by anyone on the bridge. In fact, it was hardly felt by anyone on the ship. We just went through a like butter.
With 14,000 passengers on board in dangerous waters, the Queen Mary was under strict orders to not stop under any circumstances.
There's nothing we could do. We just had to steam on the same zigzag and the same speed because we were still in the danger there.
338 men lost their lives that day. 101 were picked up by other ships. On the Isle of Wight, Queen Mary enthusiast Jonathan Quayle has tracked down a unique set of documents and photographs that show just how close things came to an even more unimaginable disaster.
These are from the inquiry held just post-war as to who was responsible. Official photograph not to be released for publications. These were effectively secret photos at the time. It was really hushed up.
These pictures show that if the Queen Mary hadn't been built so well, the loss of life would have been 8 times that of the Titanic and a devastating blow to the war effort.
Instantly, they shored her up by pouring concrete into this area, which stopped the leak. She sailed with that damage for a while, and a view I've never seen before outside of this publication. You can see how extreme the damage was. The stem has been bent right round. Say that thankfully it went around partly sealed bar. An incredible amount of damage it did do.
The post-war inquiry into the disaster concluded that 60% of the blame be apportioned to the Curaçao and 40% to the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary was back in service, fulfilling her vital role, bringing even more thousands of troops across the pond. But it wasn't just soldiers she was carrying. On several occasions, it was some of the most important people in the world.
Welcome to the Churchill Suite, which is cabin number 19. This is one of the finest chambers in the Queen Mary for travel. And for our hotel guests today, Prime Minister Winston Churchill made 3 trips across the North Atlantic during World War II to meet with President Roosevelt and to plan out the final invasion of Normandy and the eventual victory in Europe.
Alan Packwood, director of the Churchill Archives in Cambridge, has discovered some rarely seen documents and photographs relating to these critical wartime journeys. Today, he's meeting Sir Winston's great-grandson, Randolph.
And of course, your great-grandfather, Winston Churchill, travelled on the Queen Mary several times during the Second World War, over to Washington in 1943, and what you have here are the record of the proceedings of chiefs of staff meetings on board the Queen Mary.
I must say, I can't believe that you've got Churchill, Alan Brooke, Charles Portal, and Lord Louis Mountbatten. You've got the entire High Command on board one ship. That was
That was quite brave of them. Absolutely, Prime Minister and Minister of Defence, but also the heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and the head of Combined Operations. Yes. So she was the cabinet room at the time.
On the Queen Mary, surrounded by his generals and chiefs of staff, Churchill could strategize and plan out some of the major events of the Second World War, including the invasion of Normandy. D-Day was made possible in no small measure by the troop-carrying service of the Queen Mary. This was the turning point to victory.
You think of her as an incredible cruiser, and it's quite a revelation to realise what an important military role the Queen Mary played in the Second World War.
For 2 more important Atlantic crossings, Churchill chose the Queen Mary for her ability to outrun the German U-boats.
Randolph, I don't know whether you've
All right,
seen
guys.
this before, but I just had to show
That's it for now.
images from
Thank you very much for watching.
They look so relaxed, don't they?